Do you remember feeding a kid in 1999? The question hit her like a fist to the chest. Kelly Anderson stood frozen behind her counter, flour on her hands, coffee going cold, while 178 motorcycles shook the glass off her pastry case, and a man built like a wall looked at her like she was the only person on earth who could answer him. She hadn't heard that year spoken out loud in a very long time. She hadn't let herself. Because 1999 was the year a bruised, half-starved boy stumbled through her door and disappeared 2 weeks later. And she never stopped wondering if she had saved him or lost him forever. Before we go any further, if this story hits you, subscribe right now, drop your city in the comments, and let's see how far Kelly's story can travel. The morning had started the way every morning started in Millbrook, Pennsylvania. Quiet. The kind of quiet that used to feel like a gift, and now, after 22 years of it, felt more like a weight Kelly Anderson had learned to carry without complaining. She was up before 4, same as always. Her alarm didn't even go off anymore. Her body just knew. It knew because Tom had trained it that way, back when he was alive and the two of them would stumble into the kitchen together in the dark, bumping elbows, laughing too loud for 4 in the morning, neither of them caring. Tom had been gone for 7 years now, but the alarm still didn't go off. Her body still knew. She moved through the bakery the way a person moves through a place they have memorized down to the inch. The cold handle of the walk-in refrigerator, the particular creak of the 3rd floorboard near the mixing station, the smell, God, the smell, of cinnamon and yeast that had soaked so deep into the walls of this building over the years that Kelly sometimes thought it would outlast everything. Outlast her. Outlast the town itself. She pulled out the dough she had prepared the night before and pressed her palms into it. Tom's recipe. Tom's cinnamon rolls. Tom's dream. She had not changed a single ingredient in 22 years. People asked her sometimes why she didn't expand, open a second location, get a website, sell them online, do something bigger with what she had built. And Kelly would smile in that patient, tired way of hers and say, "This was never supposed to be big. It was supposed to be good." That's what Tom always said. She believed it then. She believed it now. Even on the mornings when the quiet got too heavy, by 6:15, the first rolls were in the oven. By 7, the front door was unlocked. The little bell above it chimed twice, and the regulars started filing in. Margaret from the post office. Old Dennis with his hearing aids turned too low, so he always ordered by pointing. The Ruiz family, all 5 of them, loud and tangled together like a ball of string, the youngest one always pressing his nose against the glass of the pastry case. Kelly worked the counter herself. She always worked the counter herself. She had a part-time girl who came in on weekends, a high school junior named Becca, who had her grandmother's laugh and her mother's tendency to text when she thought no one was looking. But on weekdays, Kelly was it. That was fine. That had always been fine. "Morning, Kelly," said Margaret, setting her purse on the counter. "2 rolls and a black coffee. You look tired." "I'm fine, Margaret." "You always say that." "Because I'm always fine." Margaret squinted at her over the rims of her reading glasses, with the expression of a woman who had known Kelly Anderson for 30 years and was not even slightly convinced. "You know what you need? Don't. A vacation. Margaret, or a dog. A dog would be good for you. My sister got a rescue last spring and she says, 'I have plants,'" Kelly said, sliding the coffee across the counter. "Plants are fine. I can leave them alone." "That's exactly the problem," Margaret said, but she took her coffee and moved to her usual table by the window, because after 30 years, she also knew when Kelly Anderson was done with a conversation. It was a little past 9 when the bell above the door chimed again. Kelly looked up from the register. The boy who walked in looked like he had been through something. That was the only way to put it. He was young. She'd find out later he was 17, though he looked older and younger at the same time, the way kids do when life has used them hard. His lip was split. There was a bruise along his jaw, purple and fresh, the kind you don't get from walking into a door, no matter what anyone tells you. His jacket was too thin for January. One of his shoes had a sole that had started to separate, and he walked carefully, the way people do when they're trying not to let anyone notice something is wrong. He stood just inside the door and looked at the case of pastries, like a man staring at something he had no right to want. Kelly had seen that look before. She had worn it herself once, a long time ago, before Tom found her at her lowest and told her she was worth something. She came out from behind the counter. "You hungry?" she said. The boy flinched. Actually flinched, like being spoken to was a thing that startled him. That told her everything she needed to know, and then some. I have some money," he said. His voice was low and careful, the voice of someone who had learned not to take up too much space. "I can pay." "I didn't ask if you had money," Kelly said. "I asked if you were hungry." He stared at her, like the question was in a language he didn't quite speak. "Yeah," he finally said. "Yeah, I'm hungry." She put him at the small table in the back corner, the one Tom used to call the thinking spot, because it was tucked away from the window and the noise and the foot traffic. And she brought him 3 cinnamon rolls, a glass of orange juice, and a bowl of the soup she always kept on the back burner in winter, thick potato and leek, Tom's mother's recipe. She sat down across from him while he ate, which surprised him. Most adults didn't sit down across from him. Most adults barely looked at him. "What's your name?" she asked. A pause, just a half second too long. "Jake," he said. She filed that away without commenting on it. "Okay, Jake, where are you staying?" He chewed, swallowed. Around. Around? Yeah." Kelly folded her hands on the table. She had the particular stillness of a woman who did not need to fill silence with noise. She had learned that from Tom, too. Tom, who could sit in a room for an hour and make you feel more heard than most people could in a week of talking. "The shelter on Prescott Street has beds," she said. "They don't ask a lot of questions." Jake, if that was his name, glanced up at her. There was something defensive that rose in his face for a moment and then, slowly, settled. "I know about the shelter," he said. "I can't go back there." She nodded. She didn't ask why. "Okay," she said. "You need a place to sleep?" He looked at her like she was a test he wasn't sure he was supposed to pass. "I have a storeroom," she said. "It's not much. There's a cot my late husband kept in there for when he worked late. I'll put clean sheets on it. You'd have to be out by 5 so I can start prep, but you could come back after for breakfast." She paused. "And if you want to earn your keep, I've got dishes that need washing and deliveries that need running. I don't do charity." The last part was a lie, but it was a kind one. She'd learned that some people, especially young men with bruised jaws and careful shoes, couldn't accept something given freely. They needed it to mean something. They needed to work for it. Jake set down his spoon. He looked at her for a long moment. "Why?" he said. "Why what? Why would you do that? You don't know me." Kelly was quiet for a moment. The morning light came through the front windows and lay in long rectangles across the floor. The rolls in the oven smelled like everything warm in the world. "Because someone did it for me once," she said, "and I never got the chance to pay them back, so I pay it forward when I can." Jake looked at his soup. "What if I steal from you?" "Then I'll call the police and you'll have made a bad choice," she said. "But I don't think you will." "You don't know that." "No," she agreed. "I don't. But I know a person who's running from something when I see one. And I know that running people need somewhere to land before they can figure out which direction to go. So," she stood up, "finish your soup. I'll make up the cot." He stayed 2 weeks. 2 weeks that folded themselves quietly into the rhythm of the bakery, the way a new ingredient folds into dough. Carefully, with some resistance at first, and then completely. He was a good worker, better than good. He was meticulous in a way that surprised her. He figured out the dish system in one morning and never had to be told twice. He ran deliveries on the bike she kept in the back alley, the old green Schwinn Tom had ridden to work before they could afford the van, and he never once came back without every order confirmed and accounted for. He was quiet at meals. He ate everything she put in front of him. He asked about Tom. Not right away. It was maybe the fourth or fifth night, when Kelly was closing up and he was stacking chairs, that he nodded toward the framed photo she kept behind the register. Tom in his apron, laughing, flour on his nose, and said, "Is that your husband?" "Was," Kelly said. A beat. "I'm sorry," Jake said. And he meant it, she could tell. "He was a good man," she said. "The best I've ever known. He believed people could change. He believed that even when most people didn't, even when the evidence was against him." She smiled at the photo. "He was stubborn like that. Called it hope. I called it foolish. But he was right more often than I was, so." Jake was quiet for a moment, stacking the last chair. "My dad wasn't like that," he said. It came out flat and contained, the way things come out when a person has pressed the feeling down for a long time. Kelly didn't push, she just said, "I'm sorry." "Don't be," he said. "I don't think about him anymore." That was also a lie, but it was his lie, and she let him have it. The morning he left, Kelly came in at 4 to find the storeroom cot neatly made, corners tucked, pillow straight, the folded blanket on top so precise it made her chest ache. On the small folding table beside it was the key she had given him, and under the key was a piece of notebook paper. She stood there in the cold dark and unfolded it. The handwriting was careful, controlled. The handwriting of someone who had been taught that even small things deserve to be done right. "Mrs. Anderson, I don't know how to say thank you for this, so I'm just going to say it straight. You didn't have to help me, and you did anyway. And I know you said it wasn't charity, but it was. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to figure out how to be the kind of person who deserves it. Jake. P.S. I topped off the flour bins. The bag of bread flour in the back is getting low." Kelly read it twice. Then she folded it back along its creases, tucked it into the front pocket of her apron, and started the ovens. She never told anyone about that letter. Not Margaret, not Becca, not the handful of close friends who asked sometimes, in quiet moments, whether she was lonely. She kept it. Through 7 moves of furniture, through 2 break-ins, through the water damage that ruined half the storeroom the winter of 2007. She kept it in a cedar box on the shelf in the back office, alongside Tom's watch and the receipt from their first day of business. She never stopped wondering about Jake, whether he'd made it, whether he'd found what he was running toward, whether the things she'd given him, a week of soup and honest work, and a little bit of Tom's philosophy about second chances, had been enough. She told herself it had, because the alternative was too heavy to carry on top of everything else. 25 years is a long time. 25 years is long enough to stop expecting the knock at the door, long enough to stop scanning strangers' faces in the grocery store, thinking maybe, long enough to fold the wondering away like an old piece of paper and press it flat under the weight of everything else there was to do and feel and survive. Kelly was 63 years old on the morning of October 14th. She had been running the bakery for 29 years. She had outlasted 2 renovations, 1 recession, a global pandemic that nearly took the building from her, and Margaret's retirement from the post office. She still made Tom's cinnamon rolls every morning. She still took them out of the oven at exactly the same time. She still paused every single time for just a second before she moved on to the next thing. Old Dennis had finally gotten hearing aids that worked. The Ruiz boy who used to press his nose against the pastry case was now 26 and working in Pittsburgh. And Millbrook was still quiet, except for that Tuesday in October. Kelly was at the register running the mid-morning numbers when she heard it, a low rumble, distant at first, the way thunder starts before a storm you didn't see coming. She glanced toward the window and didn't see anything yet, but the sound was already in her chest, already vibrating against her sternum. The glass in the pastry case shook. Then Margaret, who had come in for her morning rolls even in retirement, because some things don't change, stood up from her table by the window with the expression of a woman who has just seen something she cannot explain. "Kelly," she said, and that was all she said. Kelly came out from behind the counter. Through the window, she saw the first one turn the corner onto Archer Street. A Harley-Davidson, chrome catching the October light. A man on it who looked like he had been carved out of something harder than most things in this world. Then the second one turned the corner. Then the third. And then they kept coming, one after another, the sound building on itself until the whole street was a wall of noise and motion, until Margaret had both hands pressed flat against the window and her coffee completely forgotten, until Becca, who was wiping down tables in the back, came running out to see what was happening and stopped dead in the doorway with her mouth open. Kelly counted. She couldn't help it. Her mind just started counting, the way it always had when something big was happening and she needed something to hold on to. 10, 20, 50, 100. 178 motorcycles pulled onto Archer Street in Millbrook, Pennsylvania on a Tuesday morning in October, and every single one of them stopped in front of Kelly Anderson's bakery. The street went quiet, not silent. The engines were still running, a low collective growl, but quiet the way a room goes quiet when something is about to happen. Kelly's hand was on the edge of the counter. She was gripping it without meaning to. "What in the—" Becca started. "Shh," Kelly said. The man at the front of the line cut his engine. One by one, up and down the street, the others followed, until the sound fell away and there was nothing but the smell of exhaust and October air and the faraway sound of a dog barking 3 blocks over. The lead rider sat on his bike for a moment. Then he swung off and stood, and he was enormous. Not just tall, but present. The kind of man who takes up space not because he is trying to, but because he simply does. His jacket had the patch, the wings, the letters, Hell's Angels. He walked toward the bakery door. Kelly did not move. Every cell in her body was telling her to do something. Call someone, step back, say a word. But she stood at the counter with her hand on its edge, and she watched the door open, and she watched this man walk in, and she looked at his face. And something happened in her chest that she had not felt in 25 years. Not fear, recognition. Not full recognition, not yet, but the edge of it. The trembling edge of a memory she had pressed flat in a cedar box alongside a watch, in a receipt, in a piece of notebook paper, and it was rising up through the floorboards of her now, and she couldn't name it yet, but she could feel it. He stopped across the counter from her. He was looking at her with an expression she couldn't read, something between searching and certain, the face of a man who has driven a long way and is finally where he intended to be. "Kelly Anderson?" he said. His voice was deep, quiet, controlled. Her hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against the counter. "Yes," she said. He looked at her for a moment. Around them, through the window, she could see his riders, all 177 of them, sitting perfectly still on their bikes, waiting. "Do you remember," he said slowly, "feeding a kid in 1999? The bakery went absolutely silent. The rolls in the oven, the low hum of the display case, the distant dog, now quiet, all of it fell away, and Kelly Anderson stood in the middle of her late husband's dream, 25 years of wondering pressing up against the inside of her ribs, and she looked at the man across the counter from her, and she said in a voice that came out steadier than she had any right to expect, "I remember." The silence between them lasted maybe 3 seconds. It felt like 3 years. Kelly's fingers were still pressed flat against the counter. She could feel the grain of the wood underneath her palms, the worn-down edge where thousands of customers had leaned over the years, where Tom used to rest his elbows when he was tired, where she had pressed her forehead more than once on the bad nights when the bakery was closed and she was alone and missing him like a missing tooth that the tongue cannot leave alone. She felt all of that in those 3 seconds. She felt 25 years. "You remember," the man repeated, not a question this time, something quieter than a question, something that sounded almost like relief. "A boy," Kelly said. Her voice was careful. She was holding it steady the way you hold a full cup, slowly, deliberately, because if you rush it, you spill. 17 maybe, came in out of the cold, January. His face was... She stopped. He was in bad shape. The man nodded once. "He said his name was Jake," Kelly continued, "but I wasn't entirely sure that was true." Something moved across the man's face. A flicker. Fast, like a card turned over and turned back before you could read it. "It wasn't," he said. "My name is Marcus, Marcus Webb." Kelly looked at him. Really looked at him. The way she hadn't allowed herself to do yet, because doing it too quickly felt like reaching for something she might drop. She looked at the line of his jaw, the set of his eyes, the way he held himself, contained, careful, like a man who had trained himself out of flinching. She thought, there he is. Not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet, certain landing, the way a key turns in a lock it was made for. "Marcus," she said. "Yes, ma'am." She exhaled through her nose. "You look..." She stopped again. "Different," he offered. "I was going to say, well," she said. "You look well." That broke something open in him that he clearly hadn't planned on. She could see it happen. A small fracture in the controlled surface of him. There and then sealed back almost immediately, but she caught it. She had spent 22 years behind a counter reading people's faces. She caught it. "I am," he said, "now." Behind her, Becca had not moved from the doorway to the back. Kelly could feel the girl watching, could practically hear her trying to decide whether to say something or disappear entirely. And Margaret was still at her table by the window, both hands wrapped around her coffee cup, completely motionless in the way that Margaret only ever got motionless when something important was happening. "You want to sit down?" Kelly asked. "I'd appreciate that," Marcus said. She came out from behind the counter. She nodded once at Becca. "It's fine, go." And Becca vanished into the back with the particular speed of a 20-year-old who understood she had just witnessed something private. Kelly led Marcus to the back corner table, Tom's thinking spot. She didn't realize until they were both seated that she had done it instinctively. That out of every table in the bakery, she had brought this man to the exact spot where she had fed that boy 25 years ago. Her hands were in her lap. She looked down at them for a moment, then back up. "Tell me," she said. Marcus leaned forward. His forearms were on the table. His hands were large and scarred across the knuckles in the way of a man who had used them hard for many years, and they were completely still. "When I left here," he said, "I had $43 and a change of clothes, and your husband's recipe for getting up in the morning." Kelly blinked. "What?" "You told me," he said, "that last night when you were closing up, you told me Tom used to say, 'Every morning is a chance to be better than yesterday.' That's all. Every morning is a chance." He paused. "I wrote it down. I had it on a piece of paper in my pocket for 4 years, until the paper finally fell apart." Kelly's throat tightened. She pressed her lips together and said nothing. "I left because I had to," Marcus continued. "There were people looking for me. I don't need you to know all of the details of what I was running from, but I need you to know that it was serious. And I need you to know that when I walked into your bakery that morning, I had already decided it was going to be my last day." He said it plainly, without dramatizing it, just laid it down on the table between them like a fact. "I had made up my mind." Kelly went absolutely still. "And then you put soup in front of me," he said, "and you sat down, and you didn't ask me why I looked the way I looked. You sat down, like I was worth sitting across from." He shook his head once. You have no idea what that does to a person who has spent years being told he's worth nothing. The bell above the front door chimed. Kelly didn't move. She heard Margaret get up quietly, heard the soft exchange of voices, heard the door close again. Margaret was running interference. After 30 years, the woman had earned it. After I left, Marcus said, I went south, ended up in North Carolina, got picked up for some work on a construction crew that didn't ask for references, which was the only kind of work I could get. Did that for about a year. Stayed out of trouble, mostly. He allowed himself a small, dry sound that wasn't quite a laugh. Met a man named Roy Buchanan. He was a Hell's Angel, and he was the first grown man who ever told me the truth about myself, which was that I was angry and I was smart, and if I didn't point the angry somewhere useful, the smart was going to get me killed. Kelly said, Roy sounds like he knew what he was talking about. Roy was the second person who ever saw me, Marcus said. You were the first. The weight of that landed between them and stayed there. He brought me in, Marcus continued, not to the life you're probably imagining. I know what people think when they hear Hell's Angels. I'm not going to pretend it's all church picnics. But what Roy gave me, what the Brotherhood gave me, was something I had never had. A code. People who showed up. People who kept their word. He looked at his hands. Roy died in 2019, pancreatic cancer. He was gone in 4 months. And before he died, he made me promise to do what you did. To see people. To sit across from the ones who had decided it was their last day and just be there. Kelly said quietly, And did you? I've been doing it for 15 years, Marcus said. Me and some of the brothers. We started small, showing up at shelters, doing rides for veterans, working with kids aging out of foster care because those are the ones nobody wants, the ones who turn 18 and the system just... He paused and made a gesture with one hand, something sharp and dismissive, a door slamming shut. They fall through. Every single time, and nobody goes looking for them. How many? Kelly asked. How many kids? Yes. Marcus was quiet for a moment. In 15 years through the foundation we built, directly served meaning housed, mentored, employed, 212 young people. He met her eyes. But if you count the ones those kids have gone on to reach, the jobs they created, the families they built, the kids they didn't abandon because someone showed them what it looked like to not be abandoned, he shook his head. I stopped counting. Kelly sat back in her chair. Something was happening in her chest that she did not have a clean word for. It wasn't just emotion, though there was plenty of that. It was more like pressure releasing, like something she had been holding for years, without even knowing she was holding it, was slowly being set down. Why are you here? She said, not unkindly, but directly, because she needed to know. Marcus reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and placed something on the table between them. A thick envelope, cream-colored, sealed. He pressed it flat with one hand and left it there. We bought a building, he said, in Pittsburgh, 11,000 square feet. We've been renovating it for 2 years. It has a kitchen, a workshop space, 12 residential rooms, and a classroom. He paused. We want someone to run it, someone who knows what it looks like to see a person who has been made to feel worthless and make them feel like they're worth sitting across from. Kelly stared at the envelope. That's the deed, he said, and it's not a loan. It's not contingent on anything. The building belongs to the foundation. What's in that envelope is our proposal for the director position in the first 3 years of operational funding, fully committed. She didn't touch it. We didn't come to ambush you, he said, and his voice shifted, a fraction softer, a fraction more careful. I know this is a lot. I've been planning this for 2 years, and I'm still sitting here not entirely sure I did it right. He looked at her directly. I should have written first, or called. I needed to see your face. Kelly said, why? Because I needed to make sure you were real, he said quietly. "I've been carrying you for 25 years, and sometimes a thing you carry for that long starts to feel like something you invented. I needed to see you and know you were real, and that what happened here actually happened." Kelly's eyes were burning. She was not a woman who cried easily. Tom used to say she had the emotional economy of a New England winter. Everything locked up tight except for the moments when it wasn't, and then it was everything at once. She blinked twice, hard, and looked at the table. "You brought 178 people," she said. "Yes." "To a bakery in Millbrook, Pennsylvania." "Yes." "That's, Marcus, that's—" "Every single one of them has a story," he said. "Not like mine. Every story is different. But every single person on those bikes has been where I was. Discarded, running, decided. And every single one of them is alive and standing because somewhere along the way, somebody sat down across from them." He leaned forward slightly. "We wanted you to see what you started. Not just me, all of it, all of them." Kelly pressed her hand over her mouth for a moment, breathed through her nose, steadied herself. "I didn't start anything," she said. "I fed a boy soup." "You fed a boy soup," Marcus agreed. "And that boy is sitting across from you right now, telling you that 212 people have a life they wouldn't have had without it." The front door chimed again. This time, Kelly looked up. It was one of the riders, younger than Marcus, late 30s maybe, with the same jacket, a scar along his left temple that had healed sober. He stopped just inside the door, looked at Marcus, and Marcus gave a small nod. The man turned and went back out. "They want to come in," Kelly said. It wasn't a question. "Not all at once," Marcus said quickly. "I told them no. But there are a few. There are 5 men out there who have asked me to ask you if they could speak with you directly. Just briefly." He paused. "You don't have to." Kelly looked at the envelope on the table, then at the man across from her who had once been a boy with a split lip and a too-thin jacket and a piece of notebook paper that he carried until it fell apart. "Who are they?" she said. Marcus exhaled slowly. "People you've never met," he said, "who are alive because of something that began in this bakery." Kelly waited. "When I started the foundation," he said, "I talked about you. Not your name. I didn't use your name without your permission. But I talked about what you did. The soup, the cot, the job that wasn't charity because you knew I needed it to mean something. I told that story to every single kid we brought in." He stopped. "And 3 of those kids grew up and joined our chapter. And 2 of their friends came with them. And those 5 men are standing outside right now because they wanted to be here when I found you." Kelly looked at the table. "One of them," Marcus said, and his voice changed again, quieter and slower, careful in a way that made Kelly's breath stop. "One of them is named Thomas." She looked up. "He asked us to name him that when he aged out of foster care," Marcus said. "He said he wanted a name that meant something. We told him the story of Tom Anderson, a man who believed in second chances." He paused. "He said that was the name he wanted." The bakery was completely quiet. Kelly Anderson sat in Tom's thinking spot, in the bakery Tom had built, and she felt the whole weight and length of 25 years pressing down on her and lifting away from her at the same time, which was a thing she had not known was physically possible until this moment, and she understood, with a clarity that she had not felt since the morning she stood in the cold, dark storeroom and read a note in careful handwriting and folded it back along its creases, that everything she thought she had done alone, she had not done alone. That the things you do in the dark, in the quiet, with no audience and no applause, and no guarantee that it means anything at all, do not disappear. They travel. They move through people like current through wire, invisible and essential, and they keep moving long after you've stopped watching. She pulled the envelope closer. She did not open it yet. She just rested her hand on top of it. "Send them in," she said. Marcus stood. He looked at her for a moment, and she saw it again, that flicker, that small fracture in the surface of him, except this time he didn't seal it back. He just let it be there. Let her see it. "Yes, ma'am," he said. He walked to the front door, and through the glass Kelly could see him step out, and she could see the rows of riders on their bikes, all of them still, all of them waiting. And she watched him speak and watched 5 men dismount and start toward the door, and she took a breath. Her hand was still on the envelope. Behind her, from the back of the bakery, she heard the oven timer go off. Tom's cinnamon rolls, right on schedule, same as every morning for 29 years. She didn't get up. For the first time in 29 years, Kelly Anderson let the rolls wait. The first man through the door was named Darius. He was broad-shouldered and soft-spoken, which was a combination Kelly had rarely encountered in one person, and he took off his helmet before he stepped inside, which she noticed because it was the kind of small courtesy that reveals everything about how a person was raised, or how hard they worked to become someone their raising didn't prepare them for. He held the helmet under one arm like a man holding a hat at a funeral. Respectful, careful. He stopped a few feet from her table. "Mrs. Anderson," he said, "I'm not going to take much of your time." "You can have as much of it as you need," Kelly said. "Sit down." He sat. He put his helmet on the chair beside him. He looked at his hands for a moment, and then looked at her with the directness of a man who had rehearsed this, and then decided to abandon the rehearsal entirely and just say the true thing. "I was 17 when Marcus found me," he said. "I was living behind a gas station in Greensboro. Had been for 6 weeks. When he brought me in, the first night, the very first night, he sat me down and told me about a woman in Pennsylvania, a bakery, a bowl of soup." He paused. "He told me that story every time one of us wanted to quit. When it got hard, when it felt pointless, when the kids we were trying to reach threw it back in our faces, or disappeared, or made the worst possible choices. He would tell us about the woman who sat down across from a boy she didn't know and acted like he was worth her time. He said that story was the foundation." Darius looked at her steadily. "I have told that story 143 times. I kept count. Every kid I've ever worked with has heard it." He paused. "I just needed you to know that." Kelly's throat was so tight it was an effort to speak. "Thank you," she managed, "for counting." The second man was named Pete. He was younger, maybe mid-30s, with the kind of energy that filled a room without quite settling. He sat down fast, clasped his hands, unclenched them, looked at her with something urgent in his eyes. "I just want to say one thing," Pete said, "because Marcus told me to keep it short, and I'm going to try." He exhaled. "My daughter is 8 years old. She is alive. I am present in her life. I coach her soccer team on Saturday mornings." He stopped, let that land. 2 years before she was born, I was not a person who was going to be present in anyone's life. I was not a person who was going to be around. He looked at Kelly directly. "Marcus's foundation pulled me out, and Marcus's foundation exists because of what you did in 1999. So when I am on that soccer field on Saturday morning, and she runs at me and I pick her up," his voice broke. Just the once. He pressed his mouth shut, steadied himself, tried again. "That moment exists because of a bowl of soup you gave a kid you didn't know. I just needed you to understand the distance that travels." Kelly pressed both hands flat on the table. The third man didn't introduce himself. He walked in, stood across from her and said, "I used to be the kid nobody came back for. I aged out of foster care at 18 with a garbage bag of clothes and $60. I have been in this foundation for 9 years. I now run our employment program. Last year I placed 31 young people in full-time jobs with benefits." He stopped. "My name is Calvin. I run numbers for a living now, Mrs. Anderson, and the number I want you to know is 31. Because every single one of those 31 people has a story that starts with yours." He reached across the table and shook her hand once, firmly, and then he walked back out. Kelly stared at the door after it closed. Marcus, standing near the counter, said quietly, "You okay?" She looked at him. "No," she said honestly, "but keep going." The fourth man was older, mid-50s, weathered in the way of a man who had lived outdoors for some portion of his life, whether he chose to or not. He sat down across from Kelly, and he did not speak for a moment. He just looked at her. And then he said, "I don't have numbers for you. I don't have a success story to give you. I have been sober for 6 years, and before that I was not sober for 11, and before that I was—" He stopped, reorganized. "I was the kind of man that people crossed the street to avoid. I was the kind of man that nobody would sit across from. Marcus's people sat across from me anyway, wouldn't let me go, told me I was worth the effort when I had given them every possible reason to believe otherwise." He folded his hands. His name, she would learn later, was Gerald, and he had been a veteran, and the details of the 11 years would stay between him and the people who had earned the right to know them. "I'm 54 years old," he said. "I shouldn't be. I know that. And I know that the chain that kept me here runs all the way back to you." He stood up. He looked at her with the simple gravity of a man who had made peace with being alive and found it an enormous and humbling thing. "I just wanted to see your face," he said. "Same as Marcus did. I just wanted to know what the beginning of all this looked like." He walked out. Kelly had to stand up. She pushed back from the table and stood and walked to the counter and put both hands on it and breathed. Behind her, she heard the bakery door open and then the quiet of one person entering, and she didn't turn around right away. She needed a moment. She needed 10 moments, and she was only going to get one, so she used it carefully. Then she turned. The fifth man was young, 23, maybe 24. He was the smallest of the five, slender, standing near the door like he wasn't entirely sure he was allowed to be here, holding his helmet in both hands in front of him the way a child holds something they're afraid of dropping. He looked up when she turned. He had the most open face she had seen in years. Not naive. There was nothing naive about it. It was the face of someone who had known hard things and decided, as an act of will, not to let those things close him off. That kind of openness cost something. Kelly knew exactly what it cost. "Mrs. Anderson," he said. His voice was younger than the rest of them, steadier than you'd expect. "Come sit down," she said. He crossed the room and sat. He placed his helmet on the table and looked at her and said, "My name is Thomas." The air went out of the room. Kelly sat very still. "Marcus told you," the young man said. It wasn't a question. "He told me you chose that name," she said. Thomas nodded. "When I aged out of the system, I had to fill out paperwork for my legal name change. And they asked me, the woman at the office, she asked me where the name came from, whether it was a family name." He paused. "I told her it was." He met Kelly's eyes. "Is that okay?" "I hope that's okay. I didn't ask permission and I've thought about that." Kelly said, "Thomas." "He sounds like he was a good man," Thomas said quickly. "From what Marcus told us, the second chances thing, the cinnamon rolls, the way he saw people." He paused. "I wanted a name that had those things already built into it. I didn't have anything from my own family worth carrying, so I took something that belonged to somebody worth carrying." He looked down at the helmet. "I'm sorry if that was wrong." Kelly reached across the table and put her hand over his. He stopped talking. She didn't say anything for a moment. She just held his hand the way you hold the hand of someone who needs to feel the weight of another person, which is a specific and irreplaceable thing that no amount of words can substitute for. Then she said, "Tom would have been so proud." Thomas did not cry. His jaw worked for a moment and his eyes went bright, and he pressed his lips together and breathed through his nose and kept himself together in the way that young men do when they have been taught, by hard experience, that falling apart is a luxury they cannot always afford. But he kept her hand, and she kept his. They sat like that for a moment that Kelly knew, even while it was happening, she would carry with her for the rest of her life. Then Thomas looked up and said, "Are you going to take the job?" Kelly almost laughed. The directness of it. The sheer, uncomplicated directness of a young man cutting straight through 20 minutes of ceremony to the actual question. "I don't know yet," she said. "Marcus has been planning this for 2 years," Thomas said. Not pressuring, just informing. "He almost drove here 4 times before today. Each time he turned around about an hour out. He said he wasn't ready. He said he needed to be sure." He paused. "I don't know what he was waiting to be sure about. I just know that this morning when he finally pulled out of the lot, all 178 of us behind him, he didn't look back once." Kelly looked at the envelope still sitting on the table where Marcus had left it. She had not opened it. "I need to think," she said. Thomas nodded. "I know." He stood, gathered his helmet. "I just want to say one more thing, if that's okay." "Go ahead." "The building in Pittsburgh," he paused. "The kitchen in it. It's big, commercial grade, the kind of kitchen you could teach in." He looked at her carefully. "Marcus didn't tell me to say that. I just thought you should know what you'd be working with." He walked out. Kelly stood alone in the middle of the bakery. Through the window, she could see them all. 178 men in Hell's Angels jackets, standing beside their bikes in the October light. Some of them were talking quietly. Some of them were watching the door. All of them were waiting. Marcus came back inside. He leaned against the counter with his arms crossed, not crowding her, not pushing, just there. The way Roy must have been there for him, she thought. Present without pressure, available without demanding. "It's a lot," he said. "It's a lot," she agreed. "I know this is your life," he said. "This bakery, I know what it means. I would never ask you to." "You're not asking me to give it up," Kelly said. It wasn't a question. "No," Marcus said. "The foundation can support a manager here if you want to keep it running. We're not here to take anything from you. We're here because you have something we need. Something that can't be hired for or bought." He paused. "You know how to see people, Kelly. And the kids at that building in Pittsburgh need someone who knows how to see them." Kelly walked to the back counter, reached under it, and pulled out 2 mugs. She poured coffee into both without asking. She slid one across to Marcus. He took it without comment. They stood on opposite sides of the counter drinking coffee, the 2 of them, in the quiet of a bakery that smelled like cinnamon and 29 years of showing up. Outside, the street held 178 people who were alive. Then Marcus said, carefully, "There's one more thing." Kelly looked up. He reached into his jacket again. Not the envelope this time. This was smaller. A folded piece of plastic, heat-sealed, the kind of preservation you do when something is too fragile to exist in open air anymore. He set it on the counter between them. Inside the plastic, she could see paper. Old paper, creased and soft with handling, the edges worn to nothing. The handwriting on it was faded but legible. She could read it from where she stood. She could read it because she knew every word. "Mrs. Anderson, I don't know how to say thank you for this, so I'm just going to say it straight." Her breath stopped. "You kept it," she whispered. "I told you," Marcus said, "until it fell apart, and then I had it preserved." He looked at it on the counter between them. "I wrote that when I was 17 years old, and I meant every word of it, and I have meant it every day since." He paused. "I thought you should have it back. I thought you should know it existed, that it was real, that it was always real." Kelly looked at the note for a long time, at the careful handwriting of a 17-year-old boy who had been made to feel worthless and was trying to say thank you in the only way he knew how. At the words she had read in a cold, dark storeroom in January of 1999, and then carried in a cedar box for 25 years. She reached out and touched the plastic with 2 fingers. She did not pick it up. She just touched it. "Marcus," she said. "Yes. The first program." She kept her eyes on the note. "At the building." "Yes. I want it to be a bakery program," she said, "not a mechanics program. I changed my mind." She finally looked up. "Tom always wanted to teach people to bake. He said food is the first language of home. He said if you can feed someone, you can make them feel like they belong somewhere. She paused. That's the first program. Baking. Teaching these kids to make something with their hands that other people need. Something that makes a room smell like safety. She paused again. We'll call it the Tom Anderson Kitchen. Marcus said nothing for a moment. Then he said, that is exactly right. And I have one condition, Kelly said. Name it. I keep this bakery open, she said. Whatever arrangement you need to make to allow that, you make it. This building was Tom's dream. It was his first. It doesn't close. Done, Marcus said immediately. And one more thing. He waited. That note, she said, looking at the plastic-sealed piece of paper on the counter. We frame it. We hang it in the kitchen at the new building, where every kid who comes through can read it. She met his eyes. Because the thing that saved you wasn't soup. The thing that saved you was knowing that someone thought you were worth the trouble of a handwritten thank you. I want those kids to see that. I want them to see what it looks like when a person decides they're going to try. Marcus looked at the note, then at Kelly. Then he did something she suspected did not happen often. He pressed the back of his hand against his mouth and looked at the ceiling for a moment. And when he looked back at her, he did not bother to pretend the last 30 seconds hadn't happened. Okay, he said, roughly. Okay. Kelly picked up her coffee. Go tell your people they can come in, she said. Not all at once, but I think I'd like to meet a few more of them. And they've been standing out there long enough. She paused. And somebody get those rolls out of the oven before they burn. Tom would never forgive me. Marcus almost smiled. It started at the corner of his mouth and spread slowly. The smile of a man who had not done it easily or often and had learned to again. Yes, ma'am, he said, and pushed off the counter and turned toward the door. Kelly picked up the envelope. She opened it. The first page was the proposal. The second page was the operational funding commitment. 3 years, fully funded, the number large enough that her hand tightened involuntarily on the paper. The third page was a letter, typed, addressed to her, signed by 47 names. Writers, foundation staff, former residents of programs Marcus had built. She read 3 lines and had to stop. She folded the letter back carefully, the way she had folded that note in a cold, dark storeroom 25 years ago, and she put it in the front pocket of her apron. The bakery door opened. The first rider came in and took off his helmet and looked at her with the particular mix of toughness and vulnerability that she was beginning to understand was not a contradiction, but a portrait. This was what a person looked like when they had been through the fire and come out the other side, still soft enough to walk into a bakery in a small Pennsylvania town, because someone told them the story of a woman who sat down. Mrs. Anderson, he said, something smells incredible. Cinnamon rolls, Kelly said. Tom's recipe. Sit down, I'll get you one. And somewhere in the back of the bakery, the oven timer was still going, patient and insistent, waiting to be answered. She answered it. They came in groups of 4 and 5, the way people file into a church when the service is already started. Quietly, with their helmets under their arms, with the particular restraint of large men trying to make themselves smaller out of respect for a space that wasn't built for them. Kelly stood behind the counter and she put cinnamon rolls on plates, and she poured coffee, and she looked at their faces, one after another, and every face was a different story wearing the same jacket. Becca had come back out from the back room. She had stopped pretending she wasn't watching and was now standing at the end of the counter openly, a dish towel in her hands, her eyes moving from face to face, with the expression of someone witnessing something they will be describing to people for the rest of their lives. You doing okay? Kelly asked her quietly, sliding a tray of rolls into the case. I genuinely do not know, Becca said. Should I be taking orders? Yes, Kelly said. And don't charge anyone. Becca looked at her. Kelly, that's like, there are 178. Don't charge anyone, Becca. Becca closed her mouth and picked up her order pad and went to work. and she did it with the focused professionalism of a girl who had been raised right and knew that some moments called for putting your questions away and just being useful. Marcus sat at the counter and watched all of it. He drank his coffee, and he watched Kelly move from the oven to the counter to the tables and back. And the look on his face was something Kelly caught twice out of the corner of her eye, and both times had to look away from because it was too much. It was the look of a man watching something he had imagined for 25 years happen exactly the way he imagined it. And there is a specific kind of fullness in that expression that is almost painful to witness because it belongs entirely to the person feeling it, and any outside observation of it is a small intrusion. A man named Ray sat down at the counter and told Kelly about his son, who was 11 and had a science fair project due Friday and had been working on it for 3 weeks. The pride in his voice was almost aggressive. It was the pride of a man who knew exactly what the alternative to this moment looked like and refused to let it go unremarked. He pulled out his phone and showed her a photo. A small boy with Ray's exact jawline, standing next to a papier-mâché model of the solar system, grinning with the totality that only 11-year-olds can manage. "That's Elijah," Ray said. "He's wonderful," Kelly said. "He doesn't know I'm here today," Ray said. "He thinks I'm at a chapter meeting, which I am, technically." The corner of his mouth lifted. "When I get home tonight, I'm going to tell him about you, about this place, because he's going to ask where I was and I'm going to tell him the truth. I always tell him the truth." He looked at the photo for a moment before sliding his phone back into his pocket. "Because that was the first thing Marcus told us. Always tell the kids the truth, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Because kids who grew up like we did, we always knew when adults were lying to us. We always knew. And every lie was a door closing." Kelly thought about Jake, Marcus, at the back table, telling her about his father. "I don't think about him anymore." The controlled flatness of it, the door pressed shut. "You're a good father, Ray," she said. He looked like he'd been handed something he didn't know how to hold. "I'm working on it," he said. "Every day I'm working on it." The bakery was getting loud now, not chaotic, but alive in a way it hadn't been in years, maybe ever. The particular loud of people who are happy to be somewhere and are not managing that happiness, just letting it happen. Kelly kept moving. She had always worked best in motion. Standing still was where the grief caught her. Moving was where she could outpace it, most days. She was pulling a second tray out of the oven when Margaret appeared at her elbow. "I called Father Donovan," Margaret said quietly. "He's sending over the church's folding chairs and 3 urns of coffee from the hall. The Ruiz family is bringing their van with extra supplies from their restaurant. You've got more people than food." Kelly looked at her. Margaret shrugged with the perfect nonchalance of a woman who had been solving problems in this town for 67 years. "What? You think I was just going to sit at my table?" She picked up a spatula. "Tell me what needs to come out of the freezer." There is a specific grace in a person who simply sees what needs to be done and does it. Kelly had always known Margaret possessed it. She had just never seen it deployed at this particular scale before. "Back freezer," Kelly said. "The 2-sheet pans on the middle shelf. And thank you, Margaret." "Don't thank me," Margaret said, already moving. "Just let me be here for this." The morning stretched on. Kelly lost track of the individual faces and let herself stop tracking and just be in it. In the noise and the warmth and the smell of coffee and cinnamon and the way the bakery felt absolutely full for the first time in longer than she could precisely name. Tom had always said the bakery was supposed to be a place people came to feel held. She had kept that. She had kept it even on the days when keeping it felt like holding a shape in sand, possible only with constant attention and only for a little while. Today it felt like the shape had held on its own. She was at the back counter when she felt Marcus at her shoulder. "Can I show you something?" he said. She turned. He was holding his phone. On the screen was a photograph of a building, brick, wide, 3 stories, the windows large and recently replaced, judging by the way they caught the light. There was scaffolding along one side and a dumpster in the front, the unmistakable evidence of active renovation. "That's the Pittsburgh building," he said. Kelly took the phone. She looked at the photograph. Then she swiped. The next photo was the interior, the main common area, high ceilings, exposed beams, the floors newly refinished and gleaming in the way of wood that has been properly treated and is ready to be walked on. She swiped again. The kitchen. It was everything Thomas had said. Commercial grade, 6 burners across 2 stations, a long prep counter down the center, a double oven on the back wall, and a window above the sink that looked out over a small courtyard. The counters were bare. The shelves were empty. It was a room waiting to become itself. Kelly stood there looking at it longer than she intended. "The renovation is 90% done," Marcus said. "We're 4 to 6 weeks from opening, pending city inspection. We have 12 young people already confirmed for the first cohort, ages 18 to 22, all aging out of or recently out of foster care, all employed or in school within the past year, all with people at the foundation vouching for them." He paused. "All waiting." Kelly handed his phone back. 12, she said. "First cohort," he said. "We want to run 3 cohorts a year, building to 24 people per cohort within 2 years. The kitchen program would be central, 2 mornings a week minimum, ideally 4. Kelly was quiet. "What scares you?" Marcus said. She looked at him. "What makes you think something scares me?" "Because you haven't said yes yet." Fair, she thought. That was fair. She turned back to the counter and straightened a tray that didn't need straightening. She was aware of herself doing it. The small, busy motion of a person organizing their hands because their mind needs a moment. "I'm 63 years old," she said. "I know. I've never run a program. I've run a bakery. There is a difference. I know that too. And I don't..." She stopped. "I don't know if I'm what those kids need. I'm a widow who makes cinnamon rolls in a small town. I'm not a counselor. I'm not a social worker. I don't have credentials." Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Kelly." She looked at him. "When I walked into this bakery in January of 1999, he said, did you have credentials?" The tray stopped moving. "You had soup," he said, "and a chair, and the willingness to sit in it across from someone nobody else wanted to sit across from." He paused. "That is the credential. That is the only credential that has ever actually mattered for this work. Everything else we can teach. Everything else we can staff around. But the thing you have, the thing you've had since you were running this counter in the worst year of your life, still feeding people, still showing up, that cannot be hired or trained or approximated." He leaned against the counter. "I have spent 15 years building this foundation, and I have never once stopped looking for someone who had what you have. I have met exactly one other person in my life who had it. His name was Roy, and he's gone, and I miss him every single day." Kelly's jaw was tight. She was not going to cry in front of 178 people. She had decided that already, and she intended to honor the decision. "You'd have full staff support," Marcus said, and he said it more gently now, shifting from the direct to the practical in the way that good persuaders do. Landing the emotional truth first, then building the rational scaffolding under it so the person has something to stand on. A co-director who handles operations, a licensed counselor on staff full-time, a case manager for each resident. Your job is the kitchen program and the culture, the intangible thing, the part that makes the difference between a building with services and a place that actually feels like home," Kelly said. "And the bakery." "And the bakery," Marcus confirmed without hesitation. "Becca said she'd be willing to take on more hours if the pay was right." Her words, not mine. Kelly turned slowly and looked across the bakery at Becca, who was chatting with 2 riders near the window with the ease of a girl who had never met a stranger in her life, laughing at something one of them had said, completely at home in a situation that would have frozen most people solid. "You talked to Becca," Kelly said. She came and found me, Marcus said, about 20 minutes ago. Said she wanted me to know that she was fully prepared to run this place in Kelly's absence if Kelly decided to take the job, and that I should make sure you knew that before you used the bakery as a reason to say no. Kelly looked at Becca. Becca, who had her grandmother's laugh and her mother's tendency to text when she thought no one was watching, was not texting now. She was fully present, completely engaged, pouring coffee with one hand and gesturing with the other, already running the room. Becca caught Kelly's eye across the bakery. She raised her eyebrows in a single clear expression that needed no translation. Well? Kelly looked away, but something in her chest shifted. She had been thinking about this all morning, ever since Marcus laid the envelope on the table, and she had been thinking about it the way she thought about the hard things, which was carefully and honestly and without letting herself look away from the parts that frightened her. And there were parts that frightened her. The scale of it, the responsibility, the particular weight of being the person a broken kid looks to on their worst day. But then she thought about what it felt like to be the person that kid looked to. She thought about Marcus at the back table on his fourth night, asking about Tom's picture. The carefulness in his voice, the way he had said my dad wasn't like that, impressed the feeling down, and she had let him, because she had known. The way you know things about people when you have been paying attention for a long time, that it needed to stay pressed down until he was ready, and that her job in that moment was not to excavate it, but simply to remain. Present, available, worth staying near. She could do that. She had been doing that her entire adult life, and she had never once stopped to name it as a skill, had thought of it only as the minimum a person owed to another person, had not understood until today, until this room full of people who were here because of it, that it was actually the rarest and most essential thing. She was about to speak when the front door opened, and a man she didn't recognize walked in. Not a rider, no jacket, no helmet, just a man in a gray coat with a clipboard, looking slightly overwhelmed by what he had walked into. "I'm looking for a Kelly Anderson," he said. "That's me," Kelly said. "I'm with the Pittsburgh City Planning and Zoning Office," he said, scanning the room with the expression of a municipal employee who had been prepared for most things, and not for this. "I have a co-use permit application here that was filed on behalf of the Webb Foundation for an address on..." "I'm sorry, is this a bad time?" "It's fine," Kelly said. She looked at Marcus. Marcus did not look guilty exactly. He looked like a man who had planned very carefully and whose plan was now arriving slightly ahead of schedule. "The co-use permit," he said carefully, "is for the commercial kitchen operation at the Pittsburgh building. The application requires a named director of food service operations to be approved by the city before we can open the kitchen for residential program use." He paused. "I filed it 3 weeks ago. I may have filed it with a name already on it." Kelly stared at him. "In my defense," Marcus said, "I was confident." The man with the clipboard looked between them with the expression of a man who has absolutely no idea what he has walked into, but is going to do his job anyway. "Ms. Anderson, if you could just confirm the information on the application and sign the verification form, I can process this same day. We've been told this is somewhat time-sensitive." Kelly took the clipboard. She read her own name at the top of the application. Director of Food Service Programming, Tom Anderson Kitchen, Webb Foundation Community Development Initiative, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Her name in black ink on a form that already existed in a government office before this morning, before she had agreed to anything. She looked at Marcus. "You were confident," she said. "Yes. That's either very arrogant or very faithful." "I prefer to think of it as Roy's approach," Marcus said. "He used to say, never wait to do the paperwork on something you know is right. The paperwork is an act of faith." Kelly looked at the form for a long moment. She thought about Tom, who had signed the lease on this bakery 2 weeks before the bank approved the loan, because he had told Kelly, when she panicked, that signing it was an act of faith, and the bank would follow the faith, not the other way around. He had been right. The bank came through 5 days later. She thought about a note in careful handwriting at the bottom of a cold cot. She thought about a cedar box on a shelf in the back office. She thought about 12 young people in Pittsburgh who were waiting, who did not know her name yet, who would not know her name until she made a decision, and then drove the 2 hours west and walked into that kitchen and started the ovens. She picked up the pen. She signed her name. The man with the clipboard said, "Thank you," and "We'll process this within 48 hours," and turned around and walked back out through a room of 178 Hells Angels who parted for him like water and closed behind him like water. And he disappeared back into the ordinary Tuesday he had apparently expected this to be. Kelly set the clipboard on the counter. The bakery had gone quiet. Not completely. There was still the low murmur of conversation, the clink of coffee cups, Becca's laugh from somewhere near the window, but the people close to the counter had felt the shift in the room and were watching. Marcus was watching. She looked at him. "You knew," she said. "You knew I was going to say yes." "I believed you were going to say yes," he said. "There's a difference." "What difference?" "Knowing doesn't require you," he said. "Believing requires both of us." Kelly looked at her own name on the form for a moment. Then she looked up at the bakery, at Margaret, who was standing near the oven with a spatula and eyes that were distinctly too bright to pretend nothing had happened. At Becca, who had stopped laughing and was looking at Kelly with an expression of complete and uncomplicated love. At the riders spread across every table, coffee in hand, talking and quiet and present in the particular way of people who have driven a long way because something mattered. At Thomas, sitting alone near the back window, turning his helmet slowly in his hands, watching her with that open face that cost something to maintain and was worth every cent. At the framed photo behind the register, Tom in his apron, laughing, flour on his nose. Kelly pressed her hand flat against the counter, the worn-down edge where thousands of people had leaned, where Tom used to rest his elbows, where she had pressed her forehead on the bad nights. "Okay," she said quietly, not to Marcus, not to any particular person, to the room, to the morning, to whatever you call the force that carries things forward when you're not strong enough to carry them yourself. "Okay." Marcus didn't say anything. He picked up his coffee cup and held it toward her. She picked up hers. They touched them together over the counter. No ceremony, no speech, just the quiet click of 2 cups and the smell of cinnamon rolling through a room full of people who were alive on a Tuesday in October because somebody once decided they were worth the trouble of sitting across from. The last cinnamon roll left the bakery at 12:47 in the afternoon. Kelly knew because she counted. She had made 11 batches since 4 in the morning, more than she had ever made in a single day, more than she had made in any week of the pandemic when people were ordering everything they could get their hands on just to feel like something in the world was still normal. She had run out of the bread flour Becca had restocked on Monday, had borrowed 2 bags from the Ruiz family's restaurant supply when their van arrived, had mixed, improofed, and rolled and glazed until her shoulders ached in the specific way they ached after a day that asked everything of them. She had not stopped once, not for grief, not for doubt, not for the full weight of what she had signed her name to that morning, which was sitting in the front pocket of her apron alongside a folded letter from 47 people, and had been there all day like a second heartbeat. Marcus found her in the back room at 1 o'clock, washing the last of the mixing bowls by hand the way she always did, because Tom had always said industrial dishwashers were fine for plates, but mixing bowls deserved the personal attention. She heard the door, felt his presence in the room before he said anything. The particular quality of stillness that he carried with him that she was already beginning to recognize as specifically his. "They're getting ready to leave," he said. Kelly turned off the faucet, dried her hands on the towel hanging from the oven handle. "All of them?" "All of them," he paused. "They wanted to say goodbye, if that's okay." She looked at him for a moment, this man who had been a boy, who had pressed the feeling down and kept the paper until it fell apart, and driven here from wherever he had started his morning with 177 people behind him and not looked back once. "It's okay," she said. She followed him out. What happened next was something Kelly would spend years trying to describe accurately and never quite manage, because the language available for it was insufficient. There were too many bodies in too small a space, and then they were outside on Archer Street, and there were too many bodies in too large a space. And in both cases, the experience was the same, the overwhelming physical sense of being surrounded by people who meant it, who had shown up in the most literal possible way, with their engines and their miles and their Tuesday mornings sacrificed to the act of being present for something that mattered. They lined up along the street, not formally. No one called them to order or organize the rows. They just gathered, the way people gather around something they want to be near. And Kelly walked out the front door of her bakery and stood on the sidewalk and looked at them. Someone started clapping. It spread the way fire spreads. One point of ignition, and then immediately everywhere. And within 4 seconds, 178 people were applauding on Archer Street in Millbrook, Pennsylvania. And Kelly Anderson stood in the middle of it with her dish towel still over one shoulder and her apron still on, and her eyes doing exactly what she had told them all day they were not allowed to do. She let them. She stood there and she let it happen. And she did not press her mouth shut or look at the ceiling or any of the other small mechanics of not crying that she had employed throughout the day. She just stood in it. Because Tom had always told her that when people give you something real, the least you can do is receive it fully. And she had not always been good at that, had spent most of her life deflecting and minimizing and saying, "I'm fine," to Margaret when she wasn't. But she was going to be good at it right now. For Tom. For Marcus. For the boy who had written a careful note and left it under a key on a folding table. For herself. Margaret was beside her. When had Margaret gotten beside her? She didn't know. But she felt the older woman's hand take hers and squeeze once, hard, and hold on. And Kelly squeezed back just as hard. The applause went on longer than it had any logical reason to. When it stopped, Marcus stepped forward. He was facing her, his back to his riders, and he reached into his jacket and took out a small object and held it out to her. It was a key, a single key on a plain metal ring. "To the Pittsburgh building," he said, "the copy I've been carrying since we bought it." He paused. "I was saving it for today." Kelly took the key. It was warm from his pocket. She closed her fingers around it. "There's something else," Marcus said. He turned to his riders. He said a name, Thomas, and the young man moved through the group and came forward. And he was carrying something flat and rectangular, wrapped in brown paper, tucked carefully under one arm. Thomas stopped in front of Kelly. He held out the package. "Open it," Marcus said. Kelly took it. She slid her thumb under the tape and folded the paper back. Inside was a frame, simple, dark wood, the kind of frame that says the thing inside it matters more than the thing holding it. And inside the frame, mounted on cream-colored backing, was the plastic-sealed note. "Mrs. Anderson, I don't know how to say thank you for this, so I'm just going to say it straight." Except it wasn't the only thing in the frame. Beside the note, also mounted, was a second piece of paper, not old, new, white, unlined, dated that morning in Marcus's handwriting, and on it, in the same controlled script of a man who had once been a boy who took care with small things, was a single line. 25 years later, the answer is, you saved him. You saved all of us. Kelly read it twice. She looked up at Marcus. He said nothing. He didn't need to. She pressed the frame against her chest with both hands, and she held it there. This impossible object that contained 25 years of wondering, and its answer in the same piece of wood. And she felt the morning, all of it, from 4 a.m. in the dark to this moment in the October light, move through her like current, like the thing Marcus had described, invisible, essential, traveling further than you can follow. Thomas was watching her with that open face. "Thank you," she said to him. Her voice was rough. "We made it last night," he said. "Me and Marcus and Darius. We stayed up till 2 in the morning getting the mounting right." He paused. Marcus kept saying the angle was off. From behind him, Darius's voice came. The angle was off. Somewhere in the group, someone laughed. Then someone else. Then it rippled through the whole assembly, quiet and warm, the laughter of people who were happy and not embarrassed about it. And Kelly laughed too. A short, involuntary sound that she hadn't planned, but that felt like something releasing that had been held for a very long time. Then Marcus said to the group, "We ride." The sound that followed was enormous and immediate. Engines turning over one after another, the thunder building back into the full-throated roar that had shaken Kelly's pastry case 4 hours ago. Except now she was standing in the middle of it instead of behind glass looking out, and it felt entirely different from the inside. Not frightening, not threatening, alive. She walked back to the sidewalk and stood with Margaret and Becca, who had appeared at her other side sometime in the last few minutes, and was filming on her phone with the focused intensity of a 20-year-old who understood that documentation was a form of preservation and that some things deserve to be preserved. "Are you filming this?" Kelly asked her. "Obviously," Becca said. "Becca, Kelly, there are 178 Hells Angels leaving your bakery after spending 4 hours eating cinnamon rolls and crying. I am absolutely filming this." Kelly looked at her. Then she shook her head slowly and looked back at the street. Marcus was the last to mount. He paused beside his bike and turned back to her one final time and looked at her across the sidewalk and the small distance between them and all the years that had been in that distance and were now resolved into this. Two people standing in the light of a Tuesday morning that had become something neither of them had words adequate to name. He put his hand to his chest. Once. A gesture so simple and direct that it required nothing added to it. Kelly put her hand to hers. He nodded. He mounted his bike, and the last engine in the row turned over, and the column of 178 motorcycles pulled out of Archer Street in Millbrook, Pennsylvania. And when the last one turned the corner and the sound began to fade, Kelly stood on the sidewalk and listened to it go until it was gone entirely, and Millbrook was quiet again. The ordinary, particular quiet of a small town on a Tuesday. Except it wasn't the same quiet it had been at 4 that morning. Kelly could feel the difference even before she understood it. The quiet was different because she was different, and the space a person occupies changes when the person changes, even in subtle ways that no one else might notice, and that the person themselves might not be able to articulate precisely, but can feel with complete certainty. She was different. Margaret squeezed her hand and released it. "I'm going to go home and lie down," she announced. "I've had enough feelings for one day, possibly for the entire year." She picked up her purse from where she had apparently placed it on the sidewalk at some point during the morning. "Call me tonight." "I will," Kelly said. "I mean it. Tonight, not tomorrow." "Tonight, Margaret." Margaret walked away with the brisk, purposeful step of a woman who had seen everything and survived it all and intended to continue doing exactly that for as long as possible. Becca lowered her phone. She looked at Kelly with an expression that was trying to be casual and not quite getting there. "So," Becca said. "So," Kelly said. "Pittsburgh." "Pittsburgh." Becca turned the phone over in her hands once. Then she said, "I've been thinking about what I want to do after I finish my associates. I was going to transfer to state for business management." She paused. "But I've been thinking maybe something more. Applied would be good. Something where the management actually matters because real things depend on it." Another pause. "I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud." Kelly looked at her. This girl who had her grandmother's laugh and her mother's tendency to text and, apparently, her own unannounced and entirely formidable courage. "What are you saying, Becca?" Becca shrugged with elaborate casualness. I'm saying that if the bakery needed a full manager, and the foundation needed a junior operations coordinator for Pittsburgh who could also do Millbrook oversight, those are technically two jobs that one person could grow into. She met Kelly's eyes. I'm saying I could grow into them. Kelly was quiet for a moment. She thought about the way Becca had moved through the bakery all morning. The efficiency of it, the instinct of it, the way she had gone from confused to useful in approximately 30 seconds and had never stopped being useful after that. The way she had talked to Marcus without being intimidated. The way she had filmed the send-off with a clear-eyed understanding that some things need to be kept. Come to Pittsburgh with me next week, Kelly said. See the building, meet the staff Marcus is putting in place. If you still want to talk about it after that, we'll talk about it. Becca pressed her lips together hard in the way of a person preventing themselves from reacting too quickly. Okay, she said. Okay, yes, next week. She went back inside to finish the closing work, and Kelly was alone on the sidewalk. She stood there for a moment, the framed note under her arm, the key in her pocket, the letter from 47 people folded against her ribs. The street was empty. The bakery was quiet. The October light was the particular gold of mid-afternoon, the kind of light that makes ordinary things look like they've been chosen. She went inside. She walked to the back office. She sat down at Tom's desk, still Tom's desk in her mind, always Tom's desk, the surface worn smooth where his forearms had rested, the drawer handle replaced twice, but the scratches on the front panel still there from a dolly that had gone sideways in the hallway in 2004. She set the framed note on the desk in front of her. She looked at Tom's photo, not the one behind the register, but the other one, the one she kept back here where it was only for her. The two of them on the day the bakery opened. 1993. She was 30, he was 34, and they were standing in the front doorway with their arms around each other, and the sign above them brand new, the paint not even fully dry yet, and they were laughing. She didn't remember exactly what they were laughing at, but she remembered the feeling of it, the terrified, exhilarated feeling of standing at the beginning of something you were not certain would work, but were absolutely certain was worth trying. She felt that feeling now. I said yes, she said, out loud, to the photo. She had been doing this for 7 years, and she intended to keep doing it for as long as she needed to, which she suspected was the rest of her life. And she did not find it strange or sad. She found it the most natural thing in the world. I said yes to Pittsburgh. I know what you'd say. You'd say the paperwork was an act of faith. She paused. Marcus said that too, actually. Well, he said Roy said it, but it sounded like you. The office was quiet. Kelly looked at the frame on the desk. At the two pieces of paper side by side, the one from 1999 and the one from this morning, the question and the answer, the beginning and whatever came after the beginning, which was everything, which was always everything. She picked up the frame and stood. She walked back out to the front of the bakery. She went behind the counter and she looked at the wall beside Tom's photo, the register photo, the one of him laughing with flour on his nose. She had kept the nail there for years, a small, bare nail that had once held a chalkboard special sign she'd taken down to repaint and never put back up because she couldn't figure out what should hang there instead. She hung the frame on the nail. She stepped back. The two photos hung side by side, Tom laughing, and a 17-year-old boy's careful thank you next to a man's answer 25 years later. The beginning and the proof, the seed and what grew from it, the thing you do in the dark with no audience, and what it becomes when it finally finds the light. Becca came out from the back, looked at the wall, and stopped. She didn't say anything. She stood there for a moment, dish towel in her hands, looking at what Kelly had hung. Then she said quietly, "That's exactly right." Kelly looked at it for one more moment. Then she turned around and put her hands on the counter and looked at the bakery. The tables wiped clean, the chairs straight, the case glass still bearing the ghost smudges of a morning that had held more people than the room was built for, and held them anyway. She thought about 12 young people in Pittsburgh who were waiting, who did not know yet that the kitchen in their building was about to smell like cinnamon every morning, who did not know yet that someone was coming who knew how to sit down across from a person and make them feel worth sitting across from, who did not know that this was coming for them the way it had come for Marcus, the way it had come for Darius and Pete and Calvin and Gerald and Thomas, the way it travels, through people, through years, through the specific and irreplaceable gravity of one human being deciding that another human being is worth their time. They didn't know yet, but they were about to find out. Kelly Anderson untied her apron, folded it over the counter, and started planning what she was going to teach first. Not the recipe, not the technique, not the measurements or the timing or the particular discipline of bread that Tom had spent years mastering and she had spent years honoring. First, she was going to teach them what Tom had always said a kitchen was really for. She was going to teach them that a person who can feed someone else will never again believe they have nothing to offer the world. That was the beginning. That had always been the beginning. And the beginning, it turned out, never stopped.